They called her the paper lady. That's what the cadets whispered every Thursday morning as she walked across the quad with a stack of white squares in her hands and a calm smile that didn't quite match the drill ground energy around her. Sergeant Terra Mendoza, 29, never corrected them. She'd just set the papers down, roll up the sleeves of her Academy-issue jacket, and say, "Today, we learn how to make something out of nothing." Most rolled their eyes. They didn't see the way her gaze drifted, sometimes, toward the distant perimeter fence, where the wind rattled against metal like far-off gunfire. Before I tell you what happened that day, make sure to like and subscribe if you still believe calm can be stronger than chaos, because this isn't just about origami. This is about what happens when peace meets the sound of sirens. That morning, the training room smelled faintly of printer ink and pine disinfectant. 23 cadets sat at long tables, fidgeting, tapping pencils, half listening. The Academy's motto, endure, adapt, overcome, hung in gold above the chalkboard. Terra stood in front of them with her hair pulled into a simple knot, sleeves rolled tight, posture perfect. She moved with quiet precision, her voice steady but soft, carrying the same rhythm as breathing. "Every fold," she said, lifting a paper square, "is a decision you can't take back. You bend once, and the shape changes forever. That's how command works." A few chuckles rippled through the room. Cadet Ross, the loudest, leaned to his buddy and whispered, "Yeah, paper command." He didn't realize her ears were sharper than his jokes. Terra didn't respond, just kept folding, corner to corner, edge to edge, until a small crane sat perfectly balanced on her palm. "Funny thing about paper," she said, eyes still on the crane. "It remembers every crease, even the ones you think you've smoothed out." The room went still for a moment, as if something heavier had entered the air. Then the noise returned, chairs scraping, whispers fluttering like static. Outside, clouds gathered above the ridges surrounding Hawthorne Tactical Academy. Spring sunlight faded to a thin gray. Inside, Terra moved among the cadets, adjusting folds, correcting hands, guiding them with patience that felt too deliberate for an elective course. She didn't shout. She didn't lecture. She simply placed her hands over theirs, realigning each crease with care. "Steady," she'd murmur. "If your hands shake here, they'll shake when it matters." No one knew what she meant by "when it matters." They thought she was being poetic. At 10:46 a.m., the first siren test was supposed to blare for a scheduled drill later that afternoon. It wasn't supposed to happen then. It wasn't supposed to be real. But when the shrill tone ripped through the Academy's hallways, one long, unbroken scream of alarm, the room froze. Papers fluttered to the floor like startled birds. Terra's head snapped up, and something ancient lit behind her calm eyes. The voice over the PA wasn't a recording. It was urgent, raw, and sharp. "Perimeter breach, Sector Delta. All security units to lockdown positions." Then, after a brief crackle of static, a second voice came through. Lower, colder, certain. "Sergeant Terra Mendoza, Protocol 7. Perimeter breach. Now." Every cadet turned toward her at once. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Terra stood perfectly still, the white paper still between her fingers, until the siren wailed again. Then she moved. The transformation was instant. The gentle instructor disappeared. In her place stood a soldier. "Ross," she barked, her voice suddenly clipped with authority that no one in that room had ever heard. "Lock the windows. Carter, kill the lights. Everyone else, floor position, stay low until further orders." The cadets obeyed before their brains caught up with their bodies. Training instincts they didn't know they had kicked in. Chairs toppled. The air thickened with adrenaline. Terra crossed the room in 4 quick strides, snatched a small tablet from her satchel, and tapped a code into the screen. The holographic campus grid flared to life, a full tactical overlay none of the students had ever seen. "Unauthorized movement east fence line," she muttered. "They're testing blind spots." She wasn't talking to them anymore. She was talking to command, an invisible network she'd once belonged to, maybe still did. Ross, crouched behind a table, watched her with wide eyes. "Ma'am, what's going on? Is this a drill?" She didn't look at him. "If it were a drill," she said, "we'd have a briefing first." Then, into her calm lake, "Confirm gate lockdown. Establish drone perimeter. I want thermal feed in 60 seconds. Her tone left no room for hesitation. Outside the window, The first response units were already moving. 2 jeeps racing toward the east side, floodlights cutting through gray daylight. Terra's screen flickered, showing heat signatures near the outer fence. 2 contacts, maybe 3, she said quietly. No academy insignia, no authorization tags. She reached into her jacket, retrieving a small black key card none of them had ever noticed before. Ross swallowed hard. "Ma'am, how do you have access to that system?" She finally turned her eyes on him. Calm, unflinching. "I helped build it." The words hit like a detonation. The cadets looked at one another, realization dawning too slow to make sense of it. The quiet Origami instructor had just assumed tactical command of the Academy's defense grid. Terra stepped toward the door, pausing only once. "Stay put," she ordered. "If anything happens, you'll know why I taught you to fold." Then she was gone, boots striking tile with surgical precision. Down the hallway, the alarm lights painted everything red. The echo of her footsteps faded into the distance. In the classroom, silence spread like smoke. The cadets waited, barely breathing. The paper cranes they had made sat motionless on the tables, some half-folded, some finished, each one suddenly looking less like art and more like a map of something they didn't yet understand. Minutes dragged into an hour. News traveled through whispers and half-heard radio chatter. Unknown intruders detained near perimeter. Security lockdown initiated by Sergeant Terra Mendoza. The title repeated itself in disbelief. Sergeant. Not instructor. Not civilian. Sergeant. When she returned, the sirens were silent. The all-clear lights pulsed a calm, steady blue. She walked back into the room exactly as she had left it, composed, unhurried, though the faint trace of mud clung to her boots. "Where were we?" she asked softly, picking up the fallen paper from the floor. "Ah, fold 3. Right to left alignment." No one spoke. No one even moved. The only sound was the soft rustle of paper as she refolded the crane, her hands steady, her breathing even, her eyes distant. After a long moment, she set the finished bird on Ross's desk. "It's not about making something pretty," she said. "It's about remembering what your hands can do when your head starts to panic." Ross swallowed, voice barely a whisper. Who are you really?" Terra smiled faintly, not cruelly, not proudly, just with the weariness of someone who's seen too much. "Someone who learned that calm isn't decoration," she said. "It's survival." Then she turned back to the board, drew one clean line of chalk, and began the next lesson as if nothing had happened. Out in the hallway, through the open door, the faint echo of command voices carried from the control wing, her name repeated with crisp respect. And somewhere beyond the fence line, the intruders who had triggered the breach were being escorted away, unaware that the quiet woman who'd stopped them had once led entire teams through storms far louder than any siren. Back inside, the cadets began folding again, their hands trembling, their eyes fixed on her every move. None of them would ever call her the paper lady again. The academy never looked the same after that day. By the next morning, whispers moved faster than official memos. Cadets who once laughed in the halls now stood a little straighter when she passed. They didn't know what to call her anymore. Miss Mendoza? Sergeant? Ma'am? Every title felt suddenly too small. Terra, as always, said nothing. She began class at precisely 0800, chalk in hand, her tone unchanged. "The key to stability," she told them, sketching another crease pattern on the board, "is structure under pressure." But this time, every eye in the room followed her. No one dared make a sound. Outside, the last of the perimeter drones returned to base, their quiet hum fading into the distance. Only the Academy's senior staff knew what those drones had captured. 3 armed men in tactical gear, testing weaknesses in the Academy's defenses. They'd been stopped before they could breach, thanks to a single override command traced back to her tablet. Terra didn't mention it. She never did. When a junior officer from command dropped by to deliver a commendation form, she left it and signed. "I'm not here for paperwork," she said. "I'm here to make sure they don't learn fear before they learn focus." Still, word spread. The younger cadets whispered about her past, rumors half true, half myth. Some said she had once coordinated drone strikes from a command tent in the Straits. Others swore she'd been on the ground herself, evacuating wounded under fire. None of them knew the real details, only that her calm wasn't an act. It was something she had earned. A few days later, The academy held a staff meeting in the operations wing. Lieutenant Colonel Varner, the academy's training director, reviewed the breach incident with all senior personnel present. Protocol 7 was executed flawlessly, he said, thanks to Mendoza's quick assessment. Had she not been on site, he didn't finish. The silence said enough. But Terra wasn't in the room to hear it. She was outside, sitting on the steps near the east quad, folding a paper crane. The same kind she made her students fold. Her fingers worked automatically, the paper crisp between them, her mind elsewhere, somewhere far beyond the quiet hum of campus life. Cadet Ross found her there, standing a few feet away, awkward in his posture, guilt written across his face. "Ma'am," he began, hesitating. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally, "for the jokes. I didn't know." Terra stopped him gently. "That's why we train," she said. "Because one day you'll need to act before you know." He nodded, unsure how to respond, and watched her fold the final corner of the paper with surgical precision. "You remember how I said every crease is permanent?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. It's also how you build strength. Layer by layer. Mistake by mistake." She placed the crane on the step beside her and rose. "The paper doesn't complain. It just changes shape." That evening, while most of the cadets slept, Terra returned to the control center alone. The dim glow of monitors bathed her face in pale light. She reviewed the incident logs again, rewinding footage, checking motion timestamps, and cross-referencing breach vectors. Something still bothered her. The intruders hadn't been random. Their movements were too deliberate, their timing too precise. They'd known exactly where to test the perimeter, at the blind zone between drone patrol routes. That information wasn't public. Someone had either leaked it or once belonged to the same kind of world she'd left behind. She leaned closer to the screen, studying the faint outline of one intruder's stance, the way he scanned his surroundings. Military, definitely, but not academy. Behind her, the door opened softly. It was Varner. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She didn't turn. "They weren't amateurs," she said. "No civilian squad moves that clean." Varner sighed. "I figured you'd notice. We've been told to classify the incident as training interference. Higher-ups want calm. No headlines." Terra finally looked at him. "Covering up precision breaches doesn't make calm," she said evenly. "It makes weakness." Varner met her gaze for a moment, then looked away. "You were supposed to be here to teach patience, Mendoza, not reopen old wars." "Maybe patience and vigilance aren't opposites," she replied. "Maybe they're the same thing." When he left, she sat back down, staring at the monitors until the screens dimmed to stand by. Her reflection looked back at her, older than she felt, younger than she should have been after everything she'd seen. She touched the corner of the paper crane she carried in her pocket, the one she had folded during the firefight in the Straits years ago, her hands steady even as the ground shook. She had promised herself never to be in command again, never to carry that kind of weight. But here it was, finding her again in the form of students who didn't yet understand the world waiting beyond their drills. By dawn, the sky over Hawthorne Academy had cleared. The sirens were silent, the grounds calm. Yet an unspoken current lingered. Everyone sensed that something larger had brushed against their lives. Terra stood by the fence line where the breach had occurred, boots pressed into damp soil, eyes on the horizon. Cadet Ross joined her quietly, holding out a paper crane, folded imperfectly, edges misaligned. "I wanted to get it right this time," he said. She studied it for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "You did. You learned where to fold harder." He frowned. "Is that good?" "It is when it matters." Behind them, the morning drill siren sounded, signaling another day of training. The cadets would run, march, and sweat as they always did. But something intangible had shifted. They no longer looked at their instructor as the quiet woman with the papers. They looked at her like someone who had stood at the edge of chaos and refused to blink. And though Terra never told them, deep down she knew this peace. The lull before the next breach was only temporary. But that was fine. She had always believed calm wasn't the absence of danger. It was the discipline to face it without fear. 3 weeks after the breach, the academy returned to routine. At least, that's how it looked on paper. But beneath the drills and checklists, something quiet had shifted. The cadets walked taller, spoke softer, and folded their papers with care. What used to be a classroom joke had become a ritual. Each morning, Before tactical drills, they sat in silence for 5 minutes, folding cranes in memory of the calm that saved them. They called it the Mendoza Minute. Terra never named it herself. She just watched from the doorway, coffee in hand, eyes steady, heart quiet. She didn't crave recognition. She craved readiness. On a gray Monday, the Academy prepared for its annual evaluation, a full-scale readiness inspection. Senior command officers were arriving from Central Command, and every cadet was on edge. Terra's class was outside by the drill field, lined up in perfect formation. She walked the line slowly, adjusting a collar here, a stance there, her tone even. "Remember," she said softly, "discipline isn't how still you stand. It's how you think when everyone else panics." Her words hung in the cool air like smoke. Behind her, Cadet Ross nodded quietly, repeating the phrase under his breath like scripture. At 10:17 a.m., the sky cracked with thunder. Not from weather, but from the sudden roar of engines. A fleet of military transports, unexpected, unannounced, descended toward the campus, kicking up dust and debris. Cadets froze. Officers scrambled for communication channels. Terra's tablet buzzed in her hand, flashing red. Unscheduled approach. Authorization unknown. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then instinct took over. "Everyone inside now," she shouted. Her voice sliced through confusion like a blade. Cadets sprinted for cover, but Terra stood her ground, her gaze fixed on the horizon as 3 vehicles rolled to a stop just beyond the perimeter gate. Soldiers stepped out, uniforms she recognized instantly. Not enemies, inspectors. But one of them carried something she hadn't expected, a sealed military archive case marked classified, Straits Campaign. The lead officer, Colonel Andrea Line, approached with deliberate steps. "Sergeant Terra Mendoza," she said, her tone formal but tinged with respect. "We were told you'd gone dark after the Straits. Didn't expect to find you teaching origami." Terra met her gaze without flinching. "Didn't expect to be found." Line nodded slightly. "That breached 3 weeks ago. You neutralized it using your old command grid. You realized the system you built was decommissioned years ago." "It still worked," Terra said simply. "I only used what was left." Line studied her, then opened the archive case. Inside lay a single metal insignia, tarnished but unmistakable. The Silver Star for Valor. "It was never delivered," Line said quietly. "Until now." The cadets, gathered at a cautious distance, watched as the colonel extended the medal. Terra's hand hovered over it, then pulled back. "I didn't do that alone," she said. "I was just the last one standing." Line's eyes softened. "That's exactly why it's yours." Slowly, Terra accepted the medal, the cool metal heavy against her palm. Around them, the silence deepened. Cadet Ross took an involuntary step forward, his voice breaking the stillness. "Ma'am, you were in the Straits Campaign? The one they make us study in leadership ethics?" Terra's answer was quiet. "I was in one of its footnotes." The colonel stepped back and saluted sharply. Terra hesitated, then returned it, not out of ceremony, but acknowledgement. The cadets followed suit instinctively, saluting in unison. She didn't smile, but something in her posture softened. "All right," she said after a long moment. "You've seen enough ceremony for one day. Back to formation." But no one moved right away. Respect had taken root, and for once, silence meant gratitude, not ignorance. That evening, as the sun bled gold across the parade ground, the cadets gathered quietly in the courtyard. One by one, they set paper cranes on the academy fountain. Some bore names, others initials. When Terra approached, they stepped aside, parting the circle for her without a word. She looked down at the tiny white shakes floating on the water, hundreds of them, drifting slowly, catching the last light of day. "What's all this?" she asked softly. Ross answered, "A reminder, ma'am. That calm isn't silence, it's readiness." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into her jacket, drew out her old field journal, edges frayed, corners soft from years of use, and tore out one page. On it, she wrote 6 words. "Courage isn't loud. It's steady hands." She folded the paper into a crane and placed it among the others. The ripples spread outward, carrying the new edition gently toward the center. "That's your final lesson," she said. "Now teach it forward." Weeks later, a small plaque appeared beneath the academy flagpole. Sergeant Terra Mendoza, the calm in the storm. No one claimed responsibility for putting it there. Terra never mentioned it. never took credit, never even looked at it for long. She just kept showing up, same jacket, same quiet presence, same soft voice that could command a room without raising its pitch. And when the new recruits arrived that summer, they were told a story in hushed tones about the instructor who taught origami to warriors, who turned panic into precision, who saved the academy without a single shot fired. They said she was calm under fire, unshakable, unbreakable. But those who'd seen her up close knew better. She wasn't unbreakable. She was simply ready. And sometimes, that's all the difference the world needs.